At the will reading, my parents gave my brother $25 million and told me to go earn my own. Then Grandma's lawyer stood up and revealed a secret she had kept just for me, and my dad started screaming. 3 weeks ago, I thought my biggest problem was explaining to my friends why I still drove a 2018 Honda Civic while my younger brother cruised around in a brand new Tesla. Now I'm sitting in a penthouse apartment I own, trying to wrap my head around the fact that my entire life was built on a lie so massive it makes soap operas look realistic. It started with Grandma Helen's funeral. She'd been the matriarch of our family for as long as I could remember, this tiny woman with steel gray hair who somehow commanded every room she entered. Growing up, I was definitely her favorite, not that she ever said it outright, but you could tell in the way she'd slip me an extra 20 when Mom wasn't looking, or how she'd always ask about my college classes while barely acknowledging Jake's latest business venture. Mom and Dad never seemed to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. They'd been laser-focused on Jake since he was born, 4 years after me. Golden boy syndrome doesn't even begin to cover it. When Jake failed his driving test 3 times, Dad hired a private instructor. When I failed calculus, they told me to figure it out myself. When Jake wanted to start his cryptocurrency consulting firm, which, by the way, crashed spectacularly within 6 months, they handed him $50,000. When I asked for help with my student loans, Mom literally laughed and said character was built through struggle. So yeah, I wasn't exactly shocked when the will reading went the way it did. We were all crammed into the conference room at Palmer & Associates, this stuffy law firm downtown with leather chairs that squeaked every time you moved and portraits of dead white guys staring down at you judgmentally. Mr. Palmer himself was handling the reading, a thin man in his 70s with hands that shook slightly as he shuffled through the papers. The bulk of Mrs. Helen Morrison's estate, he began, clearing his throat importantly, consisting of her primary residence, investment portfolio, and liquid assets totaling approximately $27 million, is to be divided as follows. My heart hammered. $27 million. I knew Grandma was comfortable, but this was Bezos money. Well, maybe not Bezos money, but definitely more zeros than I'd ever imagined. To her grandson Jacob Morrison, the sum of $25 million, along with all properties and remaining assets. The words hit like a physical blow. I actually felt my chest tighten, that awful sensation when you're trying not to cry in public. Jake whooped, like he was at a football game, and Dad clapped him on the shoulder with this massive grin. Congratulations, son, Dad said, and I swear there were tears in his eyes. Proud tears. Happy tears. The kind of tears he'd never shed for me, not even when I graduated summa cum laude. And to her granddaughter Emma Morrison, Mr. Palmer continued, the remaining $2 million. $2 million. It sounded like a lot until you did the math and realized it was less than 8% of everything. Less than the down payment on Jake's new Malibu beach house that he'd already started bragging about in the car. Mom reached over and patted my hand, but her smile was strained. Well, $2 million is nothing to sneeze at, honey. That's more than most people see in a lifetime. Maybe now you'll learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Dad added, not even trying to hide his satisfaction. Your grandmother may have babied you, but the real world doesn't work that way. Jake's been working hard to build something, and now he's being rewarded for it. Working hard. Jake, who'd lived in my parents' basement until he was 28 and whose idea of a business plan was a PowerPoint with Comic Sans font. I was about to respond, probably with something I'd regret, when Mr. Palmer cleared his throat again. Actually, he said, I'm afraid we're not quite finished. The room went quiet. Even Jake stopped grinning. Mrs. Morrison left specific instructions that a second attorney be present for the remainder of the proceedings. If you'll excuse me for just a moment. He stepped out of the room, leaving us in awkward silence. What's that about? Mom asked, but nobody had an answer. When Mr. Palmer returned, he wasn't alone. Following him was a woman I'd never seen before, probably in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and the kind of sharp suit that screamed expensive lawyer. She carried a briefcase that looked like it cost more than my car. This is Margaret Chen, Mr. Palmer announced. She's been Mrs. Morrison's private attorney for the past 15 years. Ms. Chen smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone who knew secrets you didn't, and she was about to enjoy sharing them. Hello, Morrison family, she said, setting her briefcase on the table with a soft thud. Helen asked me to handle this part personally. What part? Dad's voice had an edge to it now. We've heard the will. Everything's been settled. Ms. Chen's smile grew wider. Oh, Mr. Morrison, I'm afraid that was just the public will. The one Helen filed with the state and wanted everyone to see. But Helen was a very thorough woman, and she had concerns about how her true wishes would be received. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, sealed with red wax that bore an ornate H. This is Helen's true testament, witnessed and notarized, superseding the previous document in all legal matters. The temperature in the room seemed to drop about 10 degrees. Jake leaned forward. What do you mean, true testament? I mean, Mr. Morrison, that your grandmother was very specific about how she wanted her actual estate distributed. The will Mr. Palmer just read was what she called her decoy will, designed to test the family's reaction. Dad shot to his feet. That's impossible. You can't just, there are laws about this kind of thing. Miss Chen didn't flinch. There are indeed laws, Mr. Morrison, and Helen followed all of them. Creating a secondary will that supersedes the first is perfectly legal when properly executed. Would you like me to explain the specifics, or shall I just read Helen's actual wishes? Mom grabbed Dad's arm and pulled him back into his chair. Let her read it, she whispered. Miss Chen broke the wax seal with ceremonial care and unfolded the documents. Helen Morrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my estate as follows. She paused, looking directly at me. To my granddaughter Emma Morrison, who has shown integrity, compassion, and genuine love throughout her life, I leave the entirety of my estate, all properties, investments, accounts, and assets totaling approximately $53 million. The world tilted sideways. 53 million. Not 27. 53. That's impossible, Jake sputtered. She said 27 million in the first will. Ms. Chen's expression never wavered. The first will listed the assets Helen wanted the family to know about. The real estate in California, the stock portfolio, the savings accounts. What it didn't mention were Helen's offshore investments, her art collection, her precious metals holdings, or the trust fund she'd been building for Emma since she was born. Since I was born. Grandma had been planning this for 24 years. The 25 million allocated to Jacob Morrison in the decoy will, Ms. Chen continued, was actually Helen's debt portfolio, credit lines she'd opened in various banks, all of which Jacob would have been legally responsible for upon accepting the inheritance. 25 million in debt. Jake had been celebrating inheriting $25 million in debt. Dad's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. This is fraud. You can't just trick people like this. I'm afraid there's more, Ms. Chen said calmly. Helen also left a personal message for the family. She pulled out a tablet and pressed play. Suddenly, Grandma's voice filled the room, clear and strong despite her 82 years. If you're hearing this, it means my suspicions were correct, and the family reacted to Emma's smaller inheritance exactly as I expected they would. Richard, Sarah, I love you both, but you have spent the last 20 years systematically undermining and dismissing your daughter while propping up your son despite his clear lack of character or competence. Dad started to interrupt, but Mom shushed him. Emma, my darling girl, you have been the light of my life since the day you were born. Every time your parents told you to figure things out yourself, every time they handed your brother opportunities they denied you, every time they made you feel like you weren't enough, I was watching, and I was planning. My eyes were definitely watering now, but I didn't care. The money is yours, sweetheart, but more importantly, so is my pride. You've worked 2 jobs while going to school, you've been kind to everyone you've met, and you've never once asked me for anything beyond my time and love. You deserve everything I'm giving you and more. Her voice softened. As for the rest of the family, I hope this serves as a wake-up call. Emma has never needed your approval to be extraordinary, but she shouldn't have had to prove her worth to her own parents. The recording ended, leaving us in complete silence. Jake was the first to explode. This is insane. You can't just, Emma doesn't deserve this. I'm the one who visited her every weekend. I'm the one who took care of her business affairs. Ms. Chen raised an eyebrow. According to Helen's detailed records, Emma visited her an average of 3 times per week for the last 6 years. Jacob, you visited approximately twice per month, and usually only when you needed money. That's not, I was busy building my career. Building your career, Ms. Chen repeated dryly. Yes, Helen mentioned your various ventures. The cryptocurrency consulting firm that lost client funds, the dropshipping business that violated several FTC regulations, the investment advisory company that operated without proper licenses. Each word was like a physical blow. Jake's face went from red to white to green. Dad slammed his hand on the table. I don't care what kind of legal tricks you've pulled here. Emma is not getting $50 million. She's 24 years old. She doesn't know how to handle that kind of responsibility. Whereas Jacob does? Ms. Chen's voice was ice cold. The same Jacob who defaulted on 3 business loans in the past 2 years? The same Jacob who once asked Helen for money to pay his gambling debts? How did she? Jake started, then stopped. Helen was very thorough in her research, Ms. Chen explained. She hired private investigators to look into both grandchildren's finances, character, and activities. Would you like me to share more of what they found? The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Mom spoke up. "This is all very dramatic," she said, her voice shaking, "but Emma is still our daughter. She's young and impressionable, and we're concerned about the influence this kind of money might have on her." Ms. Chen turned to me for the first time since she'd started reading. "Emma, you're legally an adult and the sole beneficiary of this inheritance. However, your grandmother anticipated that your family might try to contest the will or pressure you into sharing the assets. She's arranged for you to have full legal protection and representation if needed." She handed me a business card. "This firm specializes in inheritance law and family disputes. They're already on retainer and fully briefed on your situation." Dad was on his feet again. "Now wait just a minute. We're her family. We would never, Dad." My voice came out stronger than I expected. "Stop." Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking but my voice steady. Grandma was right about everything. Every single thing. I looked around the room at my family, my parents, who'd spent my entire life making me feel inadequate, my brother, who'd coasted on privilege while I struggled. "Jake, you visited Grandma twice a month, and it was always to ask for money. I know because I was there every time, helping her with her medications and grocery shopping and doctor's appointments." Jake opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Mom, Dad, you taught Jake that the world owed him success and taught me that I had to earn love. Well, guess what? I did earn it. I earned Grandma's love by actually loving her back, not by seeing her as a bank account." The room was dead silent. "Ms. Chen," I said, turning to the lawyer, "what do I need to sign?" The next hour was a blur of paperwork, signatures, and increasingly frantic protests from my family. Dad threatened to sue. Mom cried and talked about family loyalty. Jake alternated between rage and attempts to negotiate some kind of split. Through it all, Ms. Chen remained professional and unflappable, explaining each document and making sure I understood exactly what I was inheriting. The money was just the beginning. There were properties in 3 states, an art collection worth millions, and investments in companies I'd never heard of but that apparently generated substantial passive income. "One final item," Ms. Chen said as we neared the end. She handed me an envelope with my name written in Grandma's careful cursive. "Helen asked me to give this to you after everything else was settled." I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a key and a short note. "Emma, my beautiful girl. The key is to my safety deposit box at First National. Inside, you'll find something that belonged to your great-grandmother, my mother. She gave it to me when I was your age and told me to save it for someone worthy of its history. You are worthy of everything good this world has to offer. All my love always, Grandma Helen. P.S. Don't let them guilt you into sharing." I spent my whole life watching strong women be talked out of their power by family members who never supported them in the first place. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my purse along with the key. "I think we're done here," I said to Ms. Chen. "Wait." Mom jumped up. "Emma, please, let's talk about this. You don't understand, money like this changes people. It changes relationships. We're family, we should discuss." "You're right," I interrupted. "Money does change relationships. Like how having money made you treat Jake better than me his entire life. Like how not having money made me worthless in your eyes until 30 minutes ago." Dad's face was purple again. "That's not fair. We love you both equally." "Do you?" I asked quietly. "Because I've been waiting 24 years to hear you say that, and it only happened after you found out I'm worth $50 million. I turned to Ms. Chen. "Can they contest this?" "They can try," she replied, but Helen was extremely thorough. "The will is ironclad, all procedures were followed, and we have extensive documentation of her mental state and reasoning. Any contest would be expensive and futile." "But Emma," Jake said, his voice cracking slightly, "we're siblings. We grew up together. This money, it should be shared. It's what Grandma would have wanted." I stared at him for a long moment. "Jake, you just spent 10 minutes arguing that I didn't deserve any of it." I was upset. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did." I picked up my purse and headed for the door. "You all meant exactly what you said." As I reached the exit, Dad called after me. "Emma, don't you walk away from your family." I turned back one last time. I'm not walking away from my family. I'm walking away from people who never treated me like family until it became profitable. The drive to First National Bank felt surreal. I kept expecting to wake up from some bizarre stress dream, but the key in my pocket was real, the lawyer's business card was real, and the way my hands shook as I parallel parked was definitely real. The safety deposit box was small, tucked away in the climate-controlled vault deep inside the building. The bank manager who escorted me down was overly friendly in that way service people get when they know you're worth more than their annual salary. Inside the box was a single item, a jewelry case covered in faded velvet. I opened it carefully, half expecting some priceless diamond necklace or emerald brooch. Instead, I found something much more valuable, a simple gold locket, tarnished with age, with a tiny photograph inside of a woman who looked exactly like me. There was another note tucked behind the photo. Emma, this was your great-great-grandmother's locket. She wore it when she left Ireland with nothing but the clothes on her back and the courage to build a new life. She gave it to her daughter, who gave it to me, with the understanding that it would only pass to someone who truly understood its meaning. Strength isn't about money or status. It's about knowing your worth even when everyone around you tries to convince you otherwise. You've always been strong, sweetheart. Now you have the resources to match. Love, Grandma. I fastened the locket around my neck right there in the vault. It felt warm against my skin, like it had been waiting for me. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left the law office, texts from Mom, calls from Dad, increasingly desperate messages from Jake. I scrolled through them as I walked back to my car. Emma, please call me. We need to talk about this. Mom, your mother is beside herself. Come home so we can discuss this as a family. Dad, I found some investment opportunities that could benefit both of us, Jake, and then, the one that made my blood boil, fine, keep the money. But don't come crying to us when you realize you're in over your head. Some people aren't meant for this kind of responsibility. Dad, I deleted all of them and blocked their numbers. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings with financial advisors, real estate agents, and investment managers. Ms. Chen had been right, Grandma had been incredibly thorough. The money was already properly invested and managed, generating enough monthly income that I could live comfortably for the rest of my life without touching the principal. I quit my job at the marketing firm where I'd been working 60-hour weeks for barely enough to cover rent and student loans. I paid off my debts, bought a penthouse apartment downtown, cash, and donated a substantial amount to the scholarship fund at my old university. But the most satisfying moment came 3 weeks after the will reading. I was having lunch at an upscale restaurant downtown when I spotted Jake across the dining room. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, gesturing wildly and looking increasingly agitated. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language screamed desperation. As I was paying my check, Jake appeared at my table. Emma. There you are. I've been trying to call you. I know, I said calmly. I blocked your number. His face flushed. Look, I know things got heated at the lawyer's office, but we're family. I've been thinking, maybe we could work together on some investments. I have some great ideas for, Jake. I stood up, meeting his eyes. No. What do you mean no? You haven't even heard. I mean no to everything. No to working together, no to investment opportunities, no to pretending we're close siblings when you've spent our entire lives treating me like I was invisible. I picked up my purse. I mean no to letting you or Mom or Dad guilt me into sharing something I earned through 24 years of being the granddaughter who actually cared. He grabbed my arm as I started to walk away. You can't just cut us off. We're your family. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Take your hand off me. He let go immediately, probably remembering that I now had enough money to make his life very, very difficult if I wanted to. Jake, you want to know what the real tragedy is here? If any of you had ever treated me like family, if you'd ever supported me, celebrated my achievements, or just made me feel valued, I probably would have shared the money willingly. Grandma knew that. She also knew that the only reason you'd be nice to me now is because of what I'm worth. I started walking toward the exit, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Jake? That woman you're having lunch with? She keeps checking her phone and looking toward the door like she's planning an escape route. Whatever desperate pitch you're making, it's not working. I left him standing there, mouth open like a fish. That night, I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the city lights and thinking about everything that had changed. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Emma? It's Margaret Chen. Ms. Chen. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, dear. I wanted to let you know that your family has officially dropped any thoughts of contesting the will. Apparently, your father spoke to several lawyers who all told him the same thing: he doesn't have a case. That's good news. Indeed. But that's not why I called. She paused. I wanted to tell you something Helen said to me a few months before she passed. I waited. She said she wasn't leaving you money to change your life, she was leaving it to you because she knew you wouldn't let it change who you are. Helen was very proud of the woman you'd become, Emma. She wanted to make sure you had the freedom to become even more. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and started researching charitable organizations. Grandma had been right about a lot of things, but she'd been especially right about strength. Real strength wasn't about having money, it was about choosing what to do with it. I'd spent my whole life being told I wasn't enough. Now I had the resources to help other people realize they were more than enough, exactly as they were. My parents never reached out again after those first few weeks. Jake made a few more attempts, showing up at my apartment building, sending messages through mutual friends, even creating fake social media accounts to try to contact me. I had building security handle the first, ignored the second, and blocked the third. The last I heard, he'd moved back in with mom and dad after his latest business venture collapsed. Apparently, being rejected for the inheritance had damaged his credit rating, since the banks had been counting on that $25 million to cover his existing debts. I should probably feel guilty about that, but I don't. 6 months later, I was at a charity gala for the scholarship fund I'd established when I ran into Mrs. Peterson, my old high school counselor. Emma Morrison. I heard about your grandmother. I'm so sorry for your loss, but what a wonderful way to honor her memory with this scholarship program. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. Grandma always believed in investing in education. You know, she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, your parents were here last week. My stomach tightened. Oh? They wanted to know if you'd mentioned any plans to expand the program. I think they were hoping to get involved somehow. She shook her head. It's funny how some people suddenly become interested in charity work when there's money involved. What did you tell them? Mrs. Peterson smiled. I told them that you've been very clear about wanting to maintain complete control over the foundation's direction, and that all communication needed to go through your lawyers. Her smile widened. They left very quickly after that. I laughed for the first time in months. As I write this, it's been almost a year since the will reading that changed everything. I'm sitting in the study of the house I bought in Grandma's old neighborhood, not her house, which I sold to a lovely family with 3 kids, but a smaller place 2 streets over where I can walk past her garden every morning. The money is still there, still growing, still providing more security than I ever dreamed possible. But the real inheritance wasn't the $53 million. It was the validation that I had been enough all along. Grandma knew that my parents' love had always been conditional, that Jake's respect was non-existent, that I'd spent my whole life trying to earn something that should have been freely given. She also knew that I was strong enough to walk away from people who only valued me for what I could provide them. The locket she left me hangs around my neck every day, a reminder of the generations of strong women who came before me. Women who knew their worth even when the world tried to convince them otherwise. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my family had reacted differently to that first will reading. If they'd been happy for me, if they'd celebrated my smaller inheritance instead of dismissing it, if they'd shown even a fraction of the support they'd always given Jake. But then I remember Dad's face when he told me to earn my own, and Mom's patronizing pat on the hand, and Jake's obvious disappointment that I'd gotten anything at all. Grandma had tested them, and they'd failed spectacularly. The really unsettling part? I don't think they ever understood what they'd lost. Not the money, they never had claim to that anyway. But they lost me. They lost the daughter and sister who would have moved mountains for them if they'd ever bothered to ask nicely. Now when I see families at restaurants, laughing together and supporting each other, I feel this weird combination of sadness and relief. Sad for what I never had, but relieved that I'm finally free from pretending it might someday change. The trust fund Grandma set up keeps growing, the scholarship program is helping kids who remind me of myself, and I sleep soundly every night knowing that I earned every dollar not through manipulation or entitlement, but through the simple act of loving someone who loved me back. My phone buzzes occasionally with messages from numbers I don't recognize, probably Jake with another new account or Mom trying a different approach. I don't read them anymore. Instead, I focus on the thank you letters from scholarship recipients, the photos from the literacy program I funded, and the business plans from the Women's Entrepreneurship Incubator I'm launching next year. Grandma was right about everything, but she was especially right about this: money doesn't change who you are. It just gives you the freedom to become who you were always meant to be. And apparently, I was always meant to be someone who could walk away from people who never deserved me in the first place, even if they happened to share my DNA. The locket feels warm against my chest as I finish writing this, as if Grandma's spirit approves. Somewhere, I think she's smiling at the woman I've become, the life I've built, and the family I've chosen to create instead of the one I was born into. But I should probably tell you about what happened 3 months ago, because it's the kind of twist that makes you question everything you thought you understood about people. I was at the opening of the new community center I'd funded when my phone rang. Unknown number, which I usually ignore, but something made me answer. Emma? It's your Aunt Carol. Mom's sister. I hadn't heard from her in years, not since the family dinners that stopped happening after I'd become too good for everyone, according to Dad. Aunt Carol? I stepped outside into the quiet evening air. Is everything okay? Her voice was shaking. Emma, honey, I need to tell you something. About your parents. About Jake. Things you probably should have known a long time ago. The community center's celebration continued behind me, but suddenly it felt like the world had gone silent. I probably should have said something years ago, she continued, but Sarah made me promise. And after what happened with the will, I can't keep quiet anymore. What are you talking about? Emma, your parents took money from Helen. For years. Thousands and thousands of dollars that was supposed to go into a college fund for you. The ground seemed to shift under my feet. What? When you were little, Helen set up education funds for both you and Jake. $50,000 each, growing with interest. She added to them every year on your birthdays. By the time you were ready for college, there should have been enough to pay for everything, tuition, room and board, everything. My chest felt tight. But I had to take out loans. I worked 2 jobs just to afford community college before transferring. I know, sweetheart. Because your parents spent your fund. They told Helen it was going toward your education, but they used it to cover Jake's private school tuition, his car, his first apartment deposit when he moved out the first time. The phone felt slippery in my hand. How do you know this? Because Helen asked me about it. She was so proud when you graduated with honors despite working so much, but she was confused about why you'd needed loans when she provided the money for your education. I had to tell her what Sarah and Richard had done. The pieces were clicking into place with sickening clarity. That's why she hired the private investigator. She wasn't just checking up on us, she was investigating them. Yes. And Emma, there's more. Carol's voice dropped to almost a whisper. The gambling debts Jake had? The ones that woman mentioned at the will reading? Your parents were covering those too. They took out a second mortgage on their house, borrowed against their retirement accounts. They were financially desperate, and they were counting on that inheritance to save them. I sank onto a nearby bench, my legs suddenly unable to support me. How much do they owe? Combined? With the money they stole from your fund, the loans they took to cover Jake's mistakes, and the credit card debt they've been hiding? Nearly $400,000. $400,000. No wonder Dad had been so furious about the inheritance. No wonder Mom had seemed so panicked. This wasn't just about favoritism or family dynamics, they'd been drowning financially, and they'd seen me as their life preserver. There's something else, Carol said quietly. Last week, Jake came to see me. He wanted me to call you, to set up some kind of meeting. He said he had a business proposition that could benefit the whole family. Let me guess, he needs investors. Emma, he's desperate. They all are. Sarah called me crying yesterday, saying they might lose the house. Richard's been calling everyone in the family, trying to borrow money. They've burned through every bridge, every credit line, every favor. I closed my eyes, trying to process it all. The years of being told to figure things out myself suddenly made hideous sense. They hadn't been teaching me independence, they'd been stealing my future to fund Jake's failures and then convincing themselves I was better off struggling. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Carol was quiet for a long moment. Because Jake's been saying things. Ugly things. About how he's going to find a way to make you pay for ruining the family. About how it's not fair that you got everything when you've never contributed anything. Her voice hardened. And because I'm tired of watching good people get hurt by selfish ones. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time, watching people stream out of the community center. Families, couples, kids running around, all of them probably dealing with their own complicated dynamics, but hopefully not this level of betrayal. I thought about calling Ms. Chen, but it was past 9 on a Friday night. Instead, I drove home and poured myself a glass of wine, expensive wine, from the collection Grandma had left me along with everything else, and tried to figure out how I felt about what I'd learned. Angry, obviously. Hurt, definitely. But underneath those expected emotions was something else, relief. For years, I'd wondered what I'd done wrong to deserve such different treatment from my parents. I'd analyzed every interaction, questioned every memory, convinced myself that maybe I really was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive, too demanding, too something. But it wasn't about me at all. It was about money and desperation and the sickening lengths people will go to when they're drowning. They'd convinced themselves that stealing from me was justified because I was stronger and more independent. They'd rewritten history to make Jake the victim and me the one who didn't need help. The wine tasted bitter, but I finished it anyway. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. I was having coffee on my balcony when the doorman called to announce that a Jake Morrison was in the lobby, asking to see me. Tell him I'm not available, I said automatically. Ma'am, he says it's a family emergency. Of course he did. I almost hung up, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe just the need to face this head on, made me reconsider. Send him up. Jake looked different when I opened the door. Thinner, older somehow, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that reminded me of a cornered animal. He was wearing a suit that had probably been expensive once but now looked wrinkled and worn. Emma. Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd see me. I didn't invite him in. What do you want, Jake? Can I come in? Please. I have something important to discuss with you. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. He walked into my apartment like he was cataloging everything, the artwork, the furniture, the view. Calculating its worth, probably. Nice place, he said, but his tone made it sound like an accusation. What's the emergency? I asked, not offering him a seat. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from childhood when he was about to lie to Mom and Dad about breaking something. Emma, I'm going to be completely honest with you. We're in trouble. Real trouble. Mom and Dad, we need your help. What kind of trouble? Financial trouble. The kind that ends with bankruptcy and foreclosure and... He swallowed hard. Look, I know things got heated after Grandma died. I said things I shouldn't have said. We all did. But we're family, and families help each other. I waited. I have a business opportunity. A real one this time. But I need capital to get it off the ground. If you could loan me, say, $2 million, just temporarily, until the business starts generating revenue, I could pay you back with interest and help get the family back on solid ground. No. The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. Emma, please, just hear me out. This isn't like my other ventures. I've learned from my mistakes. This is a sure thing, Jake. I walked to the door and opened it. Gab. What? Emma, you haven't even listened to the proposal. Get out of my apartment. Now. His mask slipped completely then, revealing the desperation underneath. You can't just say no. Do you know what's at stake here? Mom and Dad are going to lose their house. I'm facing bankruptcy. This family is falling apart, and you're sitting here in your ivory tower acting like it's not your problem. It's not my problem, I said quietly. You made sure of that years ago. That's not, we made mistakes, okay? We weren't perfect parents, but they tried their best. Did they try their best when they stole my college fund to pay for your private school? Did they try their best when they took out loans to cover your gambling debts while telling me to figure out my own student loans? The color drained from his face. How did you? I know everything, Jake. About the money they took from me, about the debts they've been hiding, about the fact that you've been a financial drain on this family since you turned 18. I stepped closer to the open door. I also know that you've been telling people I ruined the family, when the truth is that you've been ruining it systematically for years. That's not fair. I've had some bad luck, sure, but I was trying to build something. I was trying to make money for all of us. You were trying to make money for yourself. And when that failed, you expected everyone else to bail you out. Just like you're doing now. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, trying to figure out what angle might work. Emma, please. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll work for you, I'll sign whatever contracts you want, you'll what? Actually treat me like a sister? Actually acknowledge that I exist when it's not convenient for you? Actually support me instead of tearing me down? Yes. Yes, all of that. We can start over. We can be a real family. The sad thing was, I could hear in his voice that he actually believed it. He thought he could flip a switch and become a different person, thought he could erase decades of damage with a few desperate promises. Jake, if you had come to me a year ago, before you knew about the inheritance, before you needed something from me, and apologized for how our family treated me, we might have been able to rebuild something. But you didn't. You only care now because you need my money. That's not true. Then prove it. Walk away right now. Don't ask me for anything. Spend the next year working on yourself, figuring out your own problems, learning to treat people with respect. Then, maybe, we can have a conversation about being siblings. He looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Walk away? Emma, you don't understand. We need help now. The foreclosure proceedings have already started. I have creditors calling me every day. I can't just walk away and work on myself. Then you should have thought about that before you spent your entire adult life making terrible decisions and expecting other people to fix them for you. I gestured toward the hallway. Leave, Jake. And don't come back unless you're ready to have a relationship that doesn't involve my bank account. He stood there for another moment, his face cycling through emotions, anger, desperation, disbelief. Finally, he shook his head. You know what? Fine. Keep your money. Keep your perfect new life. But don't pretend you're some kind of saint. You're abandoning your family when they need you most, and that makes you just as selfish as you think we are. After he left, I double-locked the door and called building security to add him to the list of people who should never be allowed up without my explicit permission. Then I called Ms. Chen. Emma. How are you, dear? I've been better. I need to ask you something about Grandma's investigation. How detailed was it? Very detailed. Why do you ask? I told her about Aunt Carol's call and Jake's visit. By the time I finished, Miss Chen was making thoughtful humming noises. I see. Yes, Helen was aware of the stolen education fund. In fact, that was one of the primary reasons she decided to change her will strategy. She felt that your parents had already proven they couldn't be trusted with money designated for your benefit. Is there anything else I should know? A long pause. Emma, there are some additional documents that Helen asked me to share with you if your family ever became problematic after the inheritance. Would you like me to bring them over? An hour later, Miss Chen was sitting in my living room with another sealed envelope. Helen anticipated that your family's financial desperation might lead to harassment or guilt manipulation, she explained. She wanted you to have all the facts if that happened. Inside the envelope were photocopies of bank statements, loan documents, and what looked like email exchanges between my parents and Grandma. The emails were particularly damning, years of my parents asking for money while assuring Grandma that everything was going toward my education and well-being. Emma is doing so well in her advanced classes. The additional tutoring we arranged is really paying off. Mom, in an email sent the same month they'd withdrawn $5,000 from my education fund to cover Jake's car payments. We're so proud of how responsible Emma has become about money. She's really learning the value of hard work. Dad, 2 weeks after using my college fund to pay Jake's gambling debts. There were dozens of these emails, painting a picture of systematic deception that went back years. My parents hadn't just stolen from me, they'd lied to Grandma about it while watching me struggle and praising themselves for teaching me independence. There's one more thing, Ms. Chen said quietly. She handed me a final document, a letter in Grandma's handwriting, dated just 2 months before she passed away. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means that your family's behavior after my death was exactly as I predicted, and Margaret has determined that you need to know the full truth about what your parents have done. I want you to know that learning about the stolen education fund was the moment I decided to cut them out of my will entirely. Not because of the money itself, but because of what it revealed about their character. They stole your future to fund Jake's failures, then convinced themselves, and tried to convince me, that they were doing you a favor by making you independent. The cruelest part is that they genuinely believe their own lies. They've rewritten history so completely that they actually think Jake deserves success more than you do, despite all evidence to the contrary. You may be tempted to help them now that you have the resources to do so. Please don't. Not because they don't deserve compassion, but because helping them would enable the very behavior that hurt you for so many years. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. You are not responsible for fixing the problems that other people created, even if those people are family. You are not selfish for protecting yourself from people who have never protected you. You are not cruel for refusing to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Be free, my darling girl. Be gloriously, unapologetically free. All my love, Grandma Helen. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the locket around my neck, right next to the photo of my great-great-grandmother. 3 months later, I heard through Aunt Carol that my parents had indeed lost the house. They were living in a small rental across town, and Dad had taken a job at a hardware store to try to make ends meet. Jake had moved back in with them, supposedly looking for work but mostly, according to Carol, playing video games and complaining about how unfair life had become. I felt a pang of something, not quite guilt, but maybe sadness for the people they could have been if they'd made different choices. But I didn't call them. I didn't send money. I didn't try to fix problems that had been 30 years in the making. Instead, I focused on the family I was building for myself. The scholarship recipients who sent me updates on their progress. The women entrepreneurs whose businesses I'd helped launch. The community center volunteers who'd become genuine friends. The chosen family of people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Aunt Carol visits sometimes, and we talk about Grandma and family history and the complex dynamics of love and money. She apologizes regularly for not speaking up sooner, and I tell her regularly that she did what she could within an impossible situation. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just given Jake the loan? She asked during her last visit. I considered it seriously. He would have lost it within 6 months, come back asking for more, and nothing would have fundamentally changed. Except I would have enabled another round of the same behavior that's been destroying this family for years. And your parents? They would have learned that stealing from me had no consequences, and they probably would have found ways to do it again. I fingered the locket around my neck. Grandma was right. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the results of their choices. Carol nodded thoughtfully. Helen always was the wisest woman in the family. I think she'd be proud of the woman you've become. I hope so, I said. And for the first time in my life, I actually believed it might be true. After all, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is give someone the chance to show you exactly who they really are. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is believe them the first time. But the most important thing I learned? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who mistake your kindness for weakness, and never look back.